No one inside the Valencia paddock expected what would unfold that afternoon. A brand new Yamaha prototype, a rider making his very first steps in MotoGP, and a test session that was supposed to be nothing more than data gathering. Yet within hours, a ripple spread through garages, hospitality units, and engineering offices. A ripple caused by one man's Toprak Razgatlioglu. Telemetries were pulled, engineers whispered, and Valentino Rossi himself, a legend who rarely comments on newcomers, studied the numbers and gave an answer that shook Yamaha's walls. But the real story behind that test is far deeper, far more emotional, and far more dramatic than what the headlines ever captured. Because what Toprak showed that day wasn't just speed. It was a warning. A warning to MotoGP that Yamaha had just awakened something it had been missing for years. Before he stood under the fluorescent lights of a MotoGP garage, Toprak's journey had already been shaped by turbulence. Raised in Turkey, carrying the legacy of his father, a rider who lived on the edge of motorsport, Toprak's connection to speed was forged early, in raw, imperfect environments where instinct mattered more than technology. He was never the polished academy product, never the perfectly sculpted junior program star. He grew through chaos, unpredictability, and pressure that would have broken most riders long before they ever reached the world stage. Those who followed him across World SBK witnessed how he transformed adversity into fuel. Aggressive corner entries became trademarks. Bravery under braking became a brand. And the instinct to make a motorcycle dance on the absolute limit became the foundation of his rise. But none of that guaranteed success in MotoGP. The premier class is a different universe, harsher, more political, filled with expectations that can swallow riders whole. And just when Toprak's name began circulating around the paddock, Yamaha was entering one of the most uncertain moments in its modern history. Yet the real opportunity that would set destiny in motion had not revealed itself, not yet. For nearly 2 decades, Yamaha believed in its iconic inline-4 engine philosophy. Smooth power, gentle delivery, high corner speed. A design shaped for riders like Lorenzo Rossi and Quartararo. But MotoGP changed. Aerodynamics intensified. Ride height devices rewrote physics. Acceleration became a weapon. Suddenly, the inline-4 was no longer the elegant solution, it was the limitation. A limitation Yamaha refused to admit publicly, even as results slipped and internal frustration grew. Behind closed doors, the Japanese engineers debated the unthinkable, abandoning the identity that had defined Yamaha's MotoGP machines since 2002. Switch to a V4. A radical high-risk transformation. Management hesitated, some engineers resisted, but the pressure from within the paddock and from Yamaha's own riders grew too strong. A new era had to begin. And so quietly, almost secretly, Yamaha built its prototype V4. Every major change came with turbulence, every test carried tension, and as 2026 approached, one question kept returning. Which rider could truly unlock this machine? Then Yamaha made the boldest call of their rebuild, and everything changed. On a cool morning in Valencia, inside a garage that still smelled of fresh carbon fiber and sealed electronics boxes, Toprak stepped toward the Yamaha V4 for the first time. The mechanics watched him carefully. Some believed his adaptation would take weeks. Others doubted he would match the precision needed for MotoGP electronics. Rumors suggested the team was prepared for a slow, methodical onboarding phase. But when Toprak put his leg over the bike, something shifted. Not physically, atmospherically. He wasn't nervous. He wasn't overexcited. He was calculating, reading the machine like a puzzle he'd been preparing for his entire life. The first laps were exploratory, cautious braking points, evaluating grip, checking throttle reaction. A few moments of extreme slides caught the staff off guard, but nothing about it rattled Toprak. Telemetry sheets were printed, engineers lined in closer. Something in the data didn't match their expectations. Then came the second run. Within hours, the garage realized this wasn't a simple test, it was an awakening. Normally, transitioning from Yamaha's old crossplane inline-4 to a V4 requires days of relearning. The aggressive mid-range, the sharper engine braking, the heavier punch on corner exit, the complex electronic maps designed to tame the beast. Yet Toprak's adaptation defied the timeline. Lap by lap, the V4 stopped behaving like a prototype and began responding like a tool he'd been using for years. He braked later, brutally late, challenging the limits of Valencia's Turn 1. He slid with control that seemed impossible for someone barely hours into his debut. He played with engine braking settings that some riders avoid even after an entire season. And according to insiders, Yamaha technicians went silent as they watched the numbers climb. Speed improving. Consistency improving. Corner entry data approaching the range of established MotoGP contenders. Then Rossi gave his verdict. Not with celebration, not with exaggeration, but with a tone that carried undeniable weight. He has the aggression of Stoner and the adaptability of Marquez in his early days. Coming from Valentino Rossi, a man who almost never praises rookies, this was monumental. Yet the real surprise was Rossi's praise, but what Yamaha uncovered in the deeper layers of the data. Inside Yamaha, excitement and tension collided. Some engineers reportedly sent Toprak's data to Japan earlier than scheduled, labeling it as unexpectedly strong reference material. Others wondered what this meant for the hierarchy. Would Toprak become their new benchmark? Would future development revolve around his aggressive riding DNA? Even veteran riders took notice. Subtle glances, short conversations, expressions hinting at both curiosity and caution. In the paddock, the whispers spread far beyond Yamaha's walls. A few insiders wondered if this performance would trigger a shift in Yamaha's long-term lineup strategy. Others questioned whether their existing development riders could match what Toprak had just shown. The quiet tension grew because Yamaha knew one truth. A rider with natural aggression can reshape a project's entire direction. And in this case, that rider was only beginning. Behind closed doors, someone was already rearranging the chessboard, preparing for the next unexpected twist. The second day in Valencia didn't feel like a test anymore. It felt like a statement. Toprak stopped riding like a newcomer. He began riding like a disruptor. Like someone rewriting Yamaha's expectations with every corner. Journalists noticed his growing rhythm. Camera teams lingered near the garage. Some mechanics tried masking their reactions, but the excitement occasionally slipped through their expressions. And then a moment occurred that turned speculation into frenzy. A brief, unplanned encounter with Gigi Dall'Igna, the architect of Ducati's modern dominance. No cameras staged the moment. No official media session. Just two figures in the pit lane. Toprak speaking openly about MotoGP's brutality, the margins between success and failure shrinking every season. Gigi listening carefully, giving an answer that carried both warning and respect. Stay calm, riders always want results too quickly. Let the process bring the victory. Then barely audibles he added, "You'll do well too." A passing figure joked, breaking news, Toprak to Ducati. Laughter echoed. But beneath the humor, the meaning lingered. Toprak had entered the radar of MotoGP's most influential mind. And every manufacturer knows, moments like this rarely happen without reason. But what happened next pushed the paddock's curiosity into something much deeper. When the testing concluded, Toprak didn't act like someone who had shocked an entire paddock. He was calm, almost understated, saying the bike still had much to explore, that he needed more time to fully understand the V4's deeper characteristics. But Yamaha's engineers walked away convinced of something powerful. They had found a rider who could guide them into their most radical MotoGP transition in decades. 2026 looms with new regulations, new aerodynamics interpretations, and an arms race that will push factories into unknown territory. And in the middle of all that turbulence stands a rider who thrives in chaos. The pressure will be immense. Expectations will weigh heavier than ever. And every lap of the coming season will be dissected by fans, analysts, and rivals alike. But one truth has already surfaced. Toprak is not entering MotoGP as a participant. He is entering as a threat. The test in Valencia wasn't an introduction. It was a declaration. And as the countdown to the new era continues, one question remains suspended above the paddock like a storm cloud ready to burst. If this is what Toprak can do on day one, what happens when he finally learns to use the full power of Yamaha's V4? Because when that moment arrives, nothing in MotoGP will ever feel the same again.